the clock that goes backwards. Welcome to our podcast, where we listen, relax, and drift off to sleep peacefully. I'm Ella, your host, and today we're going on a very special journey through time. In today's story, we'll discover the secrets of an extraordinary clock that not only tells the passing hours but also teaches us about the true nature of time and memory. It's a story about a lonely watchmaker who discovers that sometimes, to move forward, we first need to look back. Before we begin our narrative, let's relax together. The video screen will go dark. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in an old watchmaker's workshop. The air is filled with the scent of polished wood and the delicate oils used on the gears. You can hear the gentle whisper of dozens of clocks marking time at different rhythms. Some are fast and cheerful tick-tocks, like the beats of a young heart. Others are slow and solemn, measuring the seconds with the patience of someone who has seen many decades pass. And at the center of it all, there's a different sound, a tick-tock that seems to be moving in the opposite direction. Take a deep breath and feel the tranquility of this timeless workshop. Here, among the golden gears and hypnotic pendulums, time takes on a different quality. It's not just a measure that pressures or limits us, but a gentle dance between past, present, and future. Feel your muscles relax as you settle into this special place where our story is about to begin. In a small town in the heart of Europe, where cobblestone streets wound their way between centuries-old houses, there was a workshop that seemed to have stepped out of a fairy tale. The faded sign hanging above the door simply read Kronos and Sons Watchmakers. Although there had been no sons for a long time, only an elderly man named Wilhelm, whose calloused hands knew the secrets of every gear, every spring, every delicate mechanism that gave life to time. Wilhelm had silver hair that gleamed like silver threads in the afternoon light, and his blue eyes held the accumulated wisdom of decades spent observing the world through the magnifying lenses he used for his meticulous work. His hands, though marked by time, were incredibly precise, capable of manipulating the smallest parts with the dexterity of a virtuoso playing the piano. Wilhelm's workshop was a sanctuary of order and beauty. Dark oak shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with clocks of all types and eras. There were ornate pocket watches with delicate engravings, mantel clocks with hand-painted porcelain faces, and imposing grandfather clocks that stood like silent sentinels in the corners of the shop. Each clock had its own personality, its own story to tell. The wall clock with painted roses once belonged to a countess who would obsessively check it during court balls. The small golden mantel clock was the companion of a poet who only wrote in the deepest hours of the morning. The large chime clock in the right corner of the workshop once announced the hours in a library, where generations of scholars spent their lives among books. Wilhelm knew the story of each piece, for he didn't just fix them, he listened to them. Yes, he believed that clocks spoke to those who knew how to listen. Not with words, of course, but with the subtle language of their movements, the rhythm of their ticks, the small hesitations that indicated a worn gear or a spring that needed attention. For decades, Wilhelm had been the guardian of time in that small town. People came to him not just to have their clocks repaired, but because his calm presence and gentle wisdom offered a pause in the fast pace of modern life. He had the rare gift of making people feel that time was not an enemy to be conquered, but a friend to be understood. But there was one clock in his workshop that was different from all the others. A clock he never showed to customers, which was hidden in a locked drawer of his workbench. It was a seemingly simple pocket watch, with an unadorned silver case and a white dial with black Roman numerals. At first glance, there was nothing extraordinary about it. But Wilhelm knew that this clock held a secret that could change the life of anyone who truly understood it. The clock had come to him mysteriously. On an autumn morning, when golden leaves danced in the cold wind blowing through the town's streets, Wilhelm had arrived at his workshop as he had every morning for 40 years, unlocking the heavy wooden door and lighting the lamps that illuminated his workspace. But that morning, there was something different on his desk. There, in the exact center of its polished surface, lay the silver watch. At first, Wilhelm thought a customer might have left it the night before, and he had simply forgotten. But when he examined it more closely, he noticed something extraordinary. The hands of the clock were moving in the opposite direction. The minute hand was slowly spinning counterclockwise, and the hour hand followed its retrograde motion. The clock was going backward. Wilhelm was a man of science, an artisan who understood the mechanisms of clocks better than any engineer. He knew that what he was seeing was technically impossible. There was no known mechanism that could make a clock go backward while maintaining its precision. And yet, there it was, measuring time in reverse with a precision that rivaled the best Swiss chronometers. Intrigued and a little uneasy, Wilhelm decided to investigate. He carefully opened the watch case, expecting to find some modified mechanism, some exotic engineering that would explain the phenomenon. But what he found left him even more perplexed. The movement inside the watch was completely ordinary. Standard gears, conventional springs, a traditional escapement. There was nothing to indicate how or why the clock was working in reverse. Stranger still, when Wilhelm held the watch and focused his attention on it, he began to notice something extraordinary happening in his mind. Memories that had long been buried in his subconscious began to emerge with crystal clarity. He could remember the exact smell of the cologne his father used. He could feel the rough texture of the leather apron he wore when teaching him the secrets of watchmaking. These memories were not vague impressions of the past, but vivid experiences that seemed to be happening in the present. Wilhelm could hear his father's gentle voice explaining how to adjust a mainspring. He could feel the heat of the forge where they tempered the steel parts. He could see the look of pride on his father's face when he completed his first clock on his own. Frightened by the intensity of these visions, Wilhelm quickly put the watch away in the drawer and tried to continue with his normal work. But throughout the day, he found that he couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious clock. It was as if it was calling to him, inviting him to explore the mysteries of time and memory more deeply. That night, after closing the workshop, Wilhelm sat in his old leather chair and took the watch out of the drawer. This time, instead of resisting the memories that began to flow, he let them come. And what he experienced forever changed his understanding of the nature of time and lost love. The memories took him back 50 years earlier, when he was a young apprentice full of dreams and energy. He could see himself working alongside his father in the same workshop, learning not just the technical aspects of watchmaking, but also the philosophy behind the craft. Clocks don't just mark time, my son, his father used to say. They teach us that every moment is precious, that we must value the present while honoring the past. But the most powerful memories were of Elena, the young woman he had loved deeply in his youth. Elena had brown hair that shone like copper in the sun, and green eyes that seemed to hold all the secrets of the universe. She was the baker's daughter in town, and every day Wilhelm would find excuses to walk by the bakery, just to see her smile. Elena had a laugh that sounded like silver bells chiming in the wind. And when she talked about her dreams of traveling the world, seeing the great cities and meeting people from distant cultures, her eyes sparkled with a passion that made Wilhelm believe anything was possible. They used to meet in the small park in the center of town, under an ancient oak tree whose branches formed a natural canopy over a time-worn stone bench. There, they shared their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Wilhelm told Elena about his ambitions to become the best watchmaker in the region, to create pieces so beautiful and precise that people would come from distant cities just to see them. Elena spoke about her dreams of becoming a teacher, of traveling to Paris to study literature, of writing books that would inspire other young women to follow their hearts. Their dreams seemed too grand for the small town where they lived, but when she described them, Wilhelm could visualize every detail as if they were already coming true. They had planned to get married the following summer. Wilhelm worked day and night to save enough money to buy a small house near his father's workshop. Elena embroidered a wedding dress using lace her grandmother had made decades earlier. Everything seemed perfect, as if the universe was conspiring to bring them together. But then came the letter, an elegant letter with an official seal, offering Elena a scholarship to study in Paris. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a chance to fulfill all the dreams she had cherished since childhood. The scholarship would cover not only her studies, but also housing and a small amount for personal expenses. Wilhelm remembered perfectly the afternoon when Elena showed him the letter. They were sitting on their usual bench under the oak tree, and the autumn leaves were falling gently around them like golden confetti. Elena's hands were trembling as she read the letter aloud, her voice a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "It's everything I've ever dreamed of," she said. looking at Wilhelm with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. "But it means leaving you, leaving our planned life, leaving everything we've built together." Wilhelm felt his heart breaking, but he knew he couldn't be selfish. He loved Elena too much to stop her from fulfilling her dreams. With a generosity that cost him more than any sacrifice he had ever made, he held her hands and said, "You must go. This opportunity may never come again." "But what about us?" asked Elena, tears finally streaming down her flushed cheeks. "If our love is true, it will survive distance and time," Wilhelm replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "And if it's not, it's better we find out now than after a lifetime." Elena left on a misty November morning. Wilhelm walked her to the train station, carrying her only suitcase and trying to memorize every detail of her face. They hugged on the platform as the train impatiently puffed, their tears mingling in the cold air. "I'll write every day," Elena promised, now replied to every letter Wilhelm promised in return. For a few months, they kept their promises. Elena's letters arrived regularly, filled with charming descriptions of life in Paris, of the inspiring professors, the friends she made, the museums and theaters she visited. Wilhelm responded with news from the small town, the progress in his work, the clocks he was creating. But gradually the letters began to arrive less frequently. Elena was busy with her studies, making new friends, discovering a world that was much bigger and more exciting than anything she had ever imagined. Wilhelm felt her drifting away, not just geographically, but emotionally, as if she was becoming a different person from the young woman he had met under the oak tree. The last letter arrived the following spring. Elena wrote about an opportunity to continue her studies in London, about a young literature professor who had become her mentor, and Wilhelm suspected something more. She didn't say directly that their relationship was over, but the subtext made it clear that she had found a new life that did not include a watchmaker from a small town. Wilhelm never replied to that last letter, not because he was angry, but because he understood that sometimes love means knowing when to let go. He kept all of Elena's letters in a wooden box he made especially for them and tried to move on with his life. The years passed. Wilhelm took over the workshop when his father passed away, established himself as a respected artisan, even had a few relationships with other women in town, but none of them could touch his heart in the same way Elena had. It was as if a part of him had left on that train with her, never to return. Now, half a century later, with the mysterious watch in his hands, Wilhelm could relive every moment of that lost love with a breathtaking intensity. He could smell the gentle rose perfume that Elena always wore. He could hear the sound of her laughter echoing through the park. He could see the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams. The watch seemed to have the power to make the past not just remembered, but experienced again. And Wilhelm began to understand that maybe this was the true meaning of the clock that goes backward. It wasn't simply a mechanical curiosity, but a tool to revisit and reconcile with the past. In the days that followed, Wilhelm found himself returning to the watch repeatedly. Each time he held it, new layers of memory unfolded. He could remember specific conversations he had with Elena, small moments of tenderness he had forgotten, even minor arguments that at the time seemed important but now revealed themselves as trivial. But the watch didn't just take him to happy memories. He was also forced to confront the regrets he had carried for decades. Why didn't he fight more for Elena? Why did he accept her leaving so easily? Would she have stayed if he had asked? One evening, while holding the watch and getting lost in particularly vivid memories of a picnic he and Elena had in the hills outside town, Wilhelm noticed something strange. The watch was not just showing him memories of the past, it seemed to be showing him alternative possibilities. Paths his life could have taken if he had made different choices. He saw himself leaving for Paris with Elena, abandoning watchmaking to follow the love of his life. He saw himself as a different man, more adventurous, willing to take risks for love. In this alternative vision, he and Elena lived in a small apartment in Montmartre, he working in a Parisian workshop while she studied, both exploring the mysteries of an ancient and romantic city together. But the vision didn't stop there. Wilhelm could also see the consequences of that alternative choice. He saw himself struggling with the French language, feeling out of place in a strange culture, his talents as a watchmaker not being fully appreciated in a more competitive urban environment. He saw Elena gradually resenting him for having abandoned his own dreams to follow hers. The clock seemed to be teaching him a profound lesson about the nature of choices and regrets. There were no perfect paths, only different paths, each with its own joys and sorrows, its own triumphs and losses. As Wilhelm continued to explore the watch's capabilities, he began to notice changes in himself. The bitterness he had carried for decades about lost love began to fade, replaced by a deeper understanding and a gentle acceptance. He began to see that his love for Elena had not been wasted, even if it hadn't lasted forever. It had shaped him, made him more compassionate, more able to appreciate the fleeting beauty of precious moments. The watch also showed him memories of all the people he had helped over the years through his work as a watchmaker. He saw the faces of customers who had come to him not just to fix clocks, but seeking solace, understanding, and wisdom. He saw how his calm presence and gentle words had provided comfort during moments of loss, celebration during moments of joy, and stability during moments of uncertainty. One afternoon, as Wilhelm worked at his bench with the special watch beside him, the doorbell rang. A young woman entered the workshop, carrying an old pocket watch that was clearly damaged. She had brown hair with golden highlights and eyes that, though different in color, had the same dreamy quality Wilhelm remembered from Elena's eyes. "Sorry to bother you," she said in a soft voice, "but I was told you're the only person in the area who can fix antique clocks like this." Wilhelm looked up from his work and smiled. "No bother at all. This is exactly the kind of work I love to do most. Please, tell me about this clock." The young woman, who introduced herself as Clara, explained that the watch had belonged to her grandfather, an immigrant who had arrived in town decades ago, with only the clothes on his back and that pocket watch. "He always said that as long as the clock worked, our family would have good luck," she said with a melancholic smile. "He passed away last month, and since then the clock has stopped working." Wilhelm carefully examined the watch, noting the careful craftsmanship and the signs of loving use. "This is a beautiful example," he said. "I can definitely restore it for you. It may take a few days, as I'll want to make sure every component is working perfectly." While Clara filled out the details for the repair, Wilhelm found himself thinking about how the special watch had changed his perspective. Before, he might have seen this transaction as simply another job. Now, he understood that he was dealing with much more than just gears and springs. He was dealing with memory, love, family connection, and the universal human need to maintain bonds with those we love. After Clara left, Wilhelm turned to the special watch with a new question. If the watch could show him the past so vividly, could it also show him the future, or at least future possibilities? That night, after closing the workshop, he held the watch with that intention. For a long time, nothing happened except the usual memories of the past. But then, gradually, the visions began to change. Instead of looking back, Wilhelm found himself glimpsing possibilities ahead. He saw himself continuing his work as a watchmaker, but with a new depth of understanding about the meaning of his craft. He saw himself not just fixing clocks, but helping people repair their connections with time, with memory, with those they had loved and lost. He saw his workshop becoming a place of healing as much as of mechanical repair. The visions also showed him an unexpected possibility. He saw Elena, now a mature woman with graying hair, returning to the town after many years. She was a widow, her children grown and settled in their own lives, and she was drawn back to her roots by nostalgia and the desire to reconnect with her youth. In the vision, Wilhelm saw her entering his workshop on a spring afternoon, initially just as a customer looking to have a clock repaired that had belonged to her late husband. But they soon recognized each other, and the conversation that followed was filled with laughter, tears, and the recognition that although their lives had taken different paths, the fundamental love they once shared had never truly died. Wilhelm saw himself and Elena spending long afternoons talking, walking in the same places where they used to meet in their youth, rediscovering each other, not as the impetuous young people they were, but as mature adults who had learned through experience the real value of love, companionship, and second chances. But the watch also showed him another possibility, one where Elena never returned, but Wilhelm found peace and satisfaction in his solitary life, enriched by the understanding the watch had given him. In this vision, he saw himself mentoring young artisans, passing on not just the technical skills of watchmaking, but also the wisdom about time and life he had acquired. Wilhelm began to understand that the special watch was not showing him a determined future, but rather teaching him that the future, like the past, was full of possibilities. The important thing was not to know exactly what would happen, but to be open to all possibilities, to be receptive to what life might bring. In the weeks that followed, Wilhelm noticed a profound transformation in himself. The melancholy he had carried for decades began to dissipate, replaced by a deep serenity and a renewed appreciation for the beauty of every present moment. He began to interact with his customers differently, listening not just to their technical needs, but to their stories, their fears, their hopes. Wilhelm's workshop became a place where people came not just to get clocks fixed, but to find a pause in the frantic pace of their lives. He offered tea to customers who seemed rushed, listened with genuine attention to those who needed to talk, and often, his gentle advice was more valuable than any mechanical repair he could make. Clara returned to pick up her grandfather's watch on a rainy Thursday. When Wilhelm returned it to her, working perfectly and polished to a shine, she began to cry. "They're not just tears of sadness," she explained. "It's that when I hear it ticking again, I feel like my grandfather is here with me." "Clocks do that," Wilhelm said gently. "They connect us not just with time, but with the people we love. Every tick-tock is a small bridge between the present and our most precious memories." That night, after Clara left, Wilhelm sat with the special watch and reflected on everything he had learned. The watch had come to him mysteriously, and now he was beginning to suspect that maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe every person who needed to learn about time, about memory, about reconciliation with the past, somehow received the opportunity to find a clock like that. He imagined other special clocks scattered throughout the world, each one finding its way to someone who needed its particular lessons. Maybe there were clocks that showed only happy memories for those overwhelmed by sadness, or clocks that sped up for those who were stuck in the past, or clocks that stopped completely for those who needed to learn to live in the present moment. The idea filled him with a sense of connection to something much bigger than himself, an invisible network of healing and understanding that stretched through time and space, connecting all the souls who sought peace and reconciliation. One night, several weeks later, Wilhelm had an extraordinary dream. He dreamed he was back in the park of his youth, sitting under the ancient oak tree. But this time, he wasn't alone. Elena was there too, not as the young woman he remembered, but as the mature woman she had become, with graying hair and eyes that shone with the wisdom of experience. In the dream, they talked quietly about their lives, about the choices they had made, about the paths they had taken. There was no bitterness or regret, just a serene acknowledgement that both had lived full lives, even if they were separated. Elena told him about her years in Paris and London, about the work she did as a teacher, about the books she wrote, about the students whose lives she touched. Wilhelm spoke about his workshop, about the thousands of clocks he had fixed, about the people he had helped, about the satisfaction he had found in his craft. They both recognized that, although their paths had diverged, the love they shared in their youth had been real and meaningful, shaping them in ways that made them better people. At the end of the dream, Elena held Wilhelm's hand and said, "Thank you for letting me go when I needed to leave, and thank you for loving me in a way that allowed me to grow and become who I needed to be." Wilhelm woke from the dream with tears in his eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. For the first time in decades, he felt completely at peace with the past, completely reconciled with the choices he had made and the ones he had not. That morning, when he opened his workshop, Wilhelm made a decision. It was time to pass the special watch on. He knew intuitively that he had learned everything he needed to learn from it, and that it was now his responsibility to ensure it found its way to someone else who needed its lessons. But how to find that person? The answer came that same afternoon, when a young man entered the workshop. He seemed troubled, carrying the weight of some deep sorrow. He had dark eyes and disheveled hair, and his clothes suggested he hadn't slept well in several days. "Excuse me," the young man said hesitantly, "but I heard you understand antique clocks. I have a problem that no one else has been able to solve." Wilhelm smiled gently. "Of course, my boy. Please, tell me about your problem." The young man, who introduced himself as Marcus, told a story that echoed painfully familiar to Wilhelm. He had recently lost his fiancée in a car accident, just 2 months before their planned wedding. She always wore this wristwatch that belonged to her grandmother, Marcus explained, taking a delicate golden piece from his pocket. It stopped working on the day of the accident. I know it's silly, but I feel like if I can get it to work again, maybe I can somehow bring her back. Wilhelm carefully examined the watch. It was a well-built piece, but the damage was primarily emotional, not mechanical. What Marcus really needed was not technical repair, but spiritual healing. He needed to learn to reconcile with the loss, to honor his fiancée's memory without becoming a prisoner of the past. I can fix this watch for you, Wilhelm said softly. But while I work on it, I'd like to show you something special. Something that may help you better understand the nature of time and memory. Wilhelm carefully opened the drawer of his desk and took out the silver watch. Marcus looked at it with curiosity, not initially noticing anything extraordinary. But when Wilhelm placed the watch in his hands, the young man immediately felt a strange sense of warmth spreading through his arms. This clock, Wilhelm explained, has a very special property. It goes backward, but not in the way you might imagine. It takes us back to memories, allows us to revisit moments we thought were lost forever. But it also teaches us that the past is not a prison from which we cannot escape, but a source of wisdom from which we can learn. Marcus held the watch with trembling hands, and almost immediately his most precious memories of Sarah began to flow. He could see her laughing on that first date at the cafe, when she spilled sugar all over the table and they spent 10 minutes cleaning it up together while talking about favorite books. He could feel the softness of her hand in his during that walk in the park when she first said she loved him. Tears began to stream down Marcus's face, but they were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude for having experienced such a deep love, even if for such a short time. The watch was allowing him to relive not the pain of loss, but the joy of what had been shared. How is this possible? Marcus asked, his voice a whisper of astonishment. Wilhelm smiled with the same gentleness he had shown to hundreds of customers over the years. There are mysteries in this world that our technical knowledge cannot fully explain. This watch came to me when I needed it most, just as it is now coming to you. It taught me that time is not just a straight line that moves from the past to the future, but a complex web where past, present, and future are intertwined in ways we rarely understand. In the days that followed, Marcus returned to the workshop repeatedly, not so much to check on the progress of his watch repair, which Wilhelm had completed on the first day, but to spend time with the special watch. Each session brought new revelations, new layers of understanding about his relationship with Sarah, and about the nature of love and loss. The watch showed Marcus not only the happy moments he remembered, but also small details he had forgotten. The way Sarah always hummed softly while cooking, how she would leave little love notes in his books, how her eyes sparkled when she talked about their plans for the future. But more importantly, the watch helped him understand that these memories were not just fragments of a dead past, but living gifts that Sarah had left for him. One afternoon, while holding the watch, Marcus had a vision that changed everything. He saw Sarah not as she was at the time of the accident, but as she could be now, if she were watching him from some place beyond mortal comprehension. In the vision, she was worried about him, sad to see him so consumed by pain that he couldn't live fully. "I didn't leave so that you would die with me," she seemed to say. "I left so that you could live for both of us. Every moment of joy you experience, every person you help, every time you love, again, is a way of honoring what we shared." Marcus then understood that his grief, though natural and necessary, had become a barrier between him and the life that Sarah would have wanted him to live. The watch was teaching him that honoring the dead does not mean dying with them, but living more fully because of what they taught us about love. When he finally returned the watch to Wilhelm, Marcus was a transformed man. The pain of loss was still there, and always would be, but now it coexisted with gratitude, hope, and a renewed appreciation for the preciousness of life. "Thank you," he said to Wilhelm, his words filled with emotion that went far beyond gratitude for a simple watch repair. "You gave me back not just Sarah's watch, but my ability to keep on living." Wilhelm accepted his thanks with the humility that characterized all his years. "The special watch did that for you, not me. I was just the temporary guardian of its wisdom. After Marcus left, Wilhelm knew that the special watch had once again fulfilled its purpose, but this time, instead of simply putting it away again, he made a different decision. It was time to let the watch follow its own path, finding those who needed it without an intermediary. That night, Wilhelm placed the watch in a small blue velvet box, along with a letter explaining its special properties and the responsibility that came with its possession. He addressed the box simply to whoever needs it and left it on the bench under the oak tree in the park where he and Elena used to meet. When he returned the next morning to check, the box had disappeared. Wilhelm smiled, knowing that the watch had found its next temporary guardian, someone who, like him and Marcus, needed to learn about the nature of time, memory, and reconciliation with the past. In the weeks that followed, Wilhelm noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere of his small town. People who had been carrying old grudges began to reconcile. Families that had been divided by disagreements began to reunite. There was a healing quality in the air, as if the special watch was mysteriously spreading its influence throughout the community. One day, while Wilhelm was working at his bench, the doorbell rang and a woman entered the workshop. She had graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore a simple but well-cut blue dress. When she turned to greet him, Wilhelm felt his heart stop for a moment. It was Elena. She was older, of course, with lines around her eyes and a slightly more cautious posture than the impetuous young woman he remembered. But her green eyes still shone with the same intelligence and kindness that had enchanted him decades ago. "Wilhelm?" she asked hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure he would recognize her. "Elena," he replied, slowly rising from his chair. "You've come back." They looked at each other for a long moment, decades of history silently passing between them. Then Elena smiled, and it was as if no time had passed at all. "I hoped you would still be here," she said softly. "I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit." "I could never mind," Wilhelm replied with sincerity. "Please, sit down, I'll make tea." As Wilhelm prepared the tea, Elena looked around the workshop with interest. "It's exactly as I imagined it would be," she commented. "You always said you wanted to have a workshop filled with clocks from all eras, and you did it." They sat at the small table in the back of the workshop, drinking tea and conversing cautiously at first, then with increasing ease. Elena told him about her life in Paris, about her years as a teacher, about the husband she had lost 2 years earlier, about the children who were now living their own lives. "Why did you come back?" Wilhelm asked gently. Elena looked out the window at the familiar streets of her youth. "After Henry died, I started thinking a lot about the choices I had made, about the paths I didn't take. I don't regret anything, you understand. I had a good life, full of love and accomplishments, but I felt a need to return to my roots, to reconnect with who I was before I became who I am now." Wilhelm smiled with understanding. "It's interesting you say that. I've also been thinking a lot about the past lately, about choices and untaken paths." They talked for hours, sharing stories of their separate lives, discovering that, although they had taken completely different paths, they had both found satisfaction and meaning in their choices. There was no bitterness or regret, just the gentle acknowledgement of 2 lives well lived. "Did you get married?" Elena asked at one point. Wilhelm shook his head. "There were other women over the years, relationships that lasted for a while. But none of them, none of them were you." Elena gently touched his hand on the table. "I'm sorry if my leaving prevented you from finding happiness." "It didn't," Wilhelm said with certainty. "I found happiness, just in a different way than I had imagined. My work, the customers I helped, the life I built here, all of it brought me deep satisfaction, and the love I felt for you was never wasted. It taught me to value beauty, to appreciate every moment, to treat every person I meet with kindness and understanding." Elena smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "You were always too wise for your age." In the days that followed, Elena stayed in town, lodging in a small guest house near the center. She and Wilhelm began to spend a lot of time together, not as young lovers trying to recapture the past, but as mature adults, rediscovering each other through the lens of experience and wisdom. They walked in the same places where they used to meet in their youth, but now their conversations were enriched by decades of lived life. Elena talked about the books she had written, about the students whose lives she had influenced, Wilhelm shared stories of special clocks he had fixed, of people he had helped through difficult times. "You've become exactly who I hoped you would become," Elena said one afternoon, as they walked through the park. "A wise and gentle man who brings beauty and order to the world. And you've become everything you dreamed of being when you were young," Wilhelm replied. "An educated and cultured woman who inspired others and left her mark on the world." They stopped under the ancient oak tree where they used to sit in their youth. The tree had grown even larger, its branches now forming a green cathedral over their heads. "I have a confession to make," Elena said, sitting on the stone bench that was still there after all these years. "Not all my days in Paris were happy. There were times, especially at the beginning, when I wondered if I had made the biggest mistake of my life by leaving you." Wilhelm sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "And I confess that there were nights when I wondered if I should have fought more for you, if I should have asked you to stay." "Do you think we would have been happy?" Elena asked. Wilhelm considered the question carefully. "We could have been happy, yes. But we also could have resented each other for the lost opportunities. You could have resented me for preventing you from fulfilling your dreams, and I could have resented you for abandoning my own plans. So you believe we made the right choices?" "I believe we made the choices we were capable of making at the time, with the knowledge and maturity we had then. And those choices led us to become the people we are now. If we had chosen differently, we would be different people." Elena was silent for a long time, absorbing his words. "There's a peace in that, isn't there?" she finally said. "In accepting that there isn't just one right path in life, only different paths, each with its own lessons and rewards." As the days passed, Wilhelm and Elena developed a comfortable routine. They met every morning for coffee at the bakery that once belonged to Elena's father, walked the town's familiar streets, had lunch together in Wilhelm's workshop while he worked, and spent the afternoons talking in the park or visiting places that held special meaning from their youth. It was a companionship different from the passionate love they had shared in their youth, but no less significant. It was the companionship of two people who knew each other deeply, who had grown and changed, but who still found pleasure and comfort in each other's presence. One night, while dining at the small family restaurant that had been their favorite place when they were young, Elena asked a question that Wilhelm had been expecting. "What happens now?" she asked gently. "I plan to stay in town for a few more weeks, but eventually I'll have to go back to Paris. I have commitments there, responsibilities." Wilhelm had been thinking about the same question. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to ask you to stay, to pick up where we left off, but another part knows that would be trying to recreate something that belongs to the past." "What if," Elena said carefully, "we didn't try to recreate the past, but to create something completely new? Something that honored who we were, but also celebrated who we've become?" Wilhelm looked into her eyes and saw not the dreamy young woman he had loved decades ago, but a mature and wise woman who had lived a full life and who was now offering the possibility of a new kind of love, a love based not on the passion of youth, but on the deep understanding and mutual respect of maturity. "What do you have in mind?" he asked. Elena smiled. "I could split my time between Paris and here. I have some writing projects I can do from anywhere, and there's something about this town that makes me feel complete, as if there's a part of me that never really left." Wilhelm felt his heart filling with a quiet, deep joy. It wasn't the burning, urgent joy of his first love, but something more lasting and serene. "And I," he said slowly, "might perhaps consider spending some time in Paris. There are things I would like to see, experiences I never had. So it's a yes?" Elena asked, her eyes shining. "It's a yes to exploring possibilities," Wilhelm replied, "to seeing what we can build together, not as the young people we were, but as the adults we've become." They sealed their new agreement with a gentle kiss, not passionate like the kisses of their youth, but tender and full of promise. In the weeks that followed, Wilhelm and Elena began to plan together. She helped him organize his workshop in a way that would allow him to travel occasionally, setting up partnerships with other watchmakers in the region who could handle emergencies in his absence. Wilhelm helped her find a small apartment in town where she could stay during her visits. News that Elena had returned and that she and Wilhelm had renewed their relationship spread quickly through the small town. To Wilhelm's surprise, the reaction was universally positive. The people who had known them since they were young were delighted with the idea that true love had found a second chance. Clara, the young woman who had brought her grandfather's watch for repair, stopped by the workshop one afternoon to express her joy. "It's like a fairy tale," she said excitedly. "It proves that true love always finds a way." Wilhelm smiled, but his answer was more nuanced. "It's not so much that love found a way," he said, "but that two people learned enough about themselves and about life to be ready for a new kind of love." That night, Wilhelm sat in his workshop, reflecting on the extraordinary twists and turns his life had taken. It had begun with the mysterious appearance of the clock that goes backward, which had helped him reconcile with his past and understand the true nature of time and memory. The watch had then found its way to Marcus, helping the young man deal with his pain and find a way to honor his lost fiancée while continuing to live. And now, in an equally mysterious way, Elena had returned at a time when they were both ready to explore the possibilities of a mature love. Wilhelm began to suspect that there were forces in the universe that worked beyond his comprehension, orchestrating events and encounters in ways that served the higher purposes of healing and growth. The special watch had been just a catalyst, a tool through which these forces worked. A few months later, on a clear spring morning, Wilhelm and Elena were walking through the town market when they saw a young woman sitting on a bench, crying softly while holding a small blue velvet box. Wilhelm immediately recognized the box. It was the same one he had used to leave the special watch in the park. "Is everything all right, dear?" Elena asked gently, approaching the young woman. The woman looked up, revealing a young face marked by deep sadness. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to compose herself. "It's just ... I found this box this morning in the park, with this strange letter and this old watch. And when I held it," her voice trailed off as new tears began to fall. Wilhelm and Elena exchanged a knowing look. "Why don't you come with us for a cup of tea?" Wilhelm suggested gently. "And you can tell us about what's bothering you." The young woman, who introduced herself as Isabella, followed them to Wilhelm's workshop. There, in an atmosphere of understanding and acceptance, she told her story. She had fought with her twin sister over a family inheritance, and the two had not spoken for 2 years. Her sister had recently died in an accident, and Isabella was consumed by guilt and regret. "When I held the watch," she explained, "I started to remember all the good things about my sister, all the happy memories I had buried under the anger. And I felt like she was trying to tell me something, to forgive me, to ask me to forgive myself." Wilhelm smiled with recognition. "The watch has a special way of helping us see the past more clearly," he said, "and sometimes that clarity is exactly what we need to find peace." During the hours that followed, Wilhelm and Elena helped Isabella understand that the watch had come to her at a time when she most needed its special wisdom. They shared their own experiences with forgiveness, reconciliation, and the importance of honoring the dead by living fully. When Isabella finally left, she carried not only the special watch, but also the hope that she could find a way to honor her sister's memory while continuing her own life. The watch had once again found someone who needed its special lessons. As the day came to an end, Wilhelm and Elena sat in the workshop, drinking tea and reflecting on the extraordinary events. "Do you think we'll see the watch again?" Elena asked. Wilhelm shook his head. "I don't think so. I think our journey with it is complete. It taught us what we needed to learn, helped us find our peace with the past, and now it's helping others." "It's a beautiful thing," Elena said softly, "to think that there are objects in the world that exist just to heal, to teach, to help people find their way." Wilhelm agreed. "And maybe the most important lesson it taught us is that time is not our enemy. The past is not a prison, the present is not a burden, and the future is not a threat. They are all part of a great tapestry, and each thread has its place and purpose." That night, as Wilhelm locked up his workshop and walked home with Elena by his side, he stopped for a moment to listen to the sounds of the night. He could hear the distant tick-tock of dozens of clocks in homes along the street, each one marking time at its own unique pace. But in the midst of all those familiar sounds, he could have sworn he heard, just for a moment, the special tick-tock of a clock going backward, gently reminding him that sometimes, to move forward, we first need to look back and find peace with where we came from. And with that comforting thought, Wilhelm took Elena's hand and together they walked home. ready to embrace whatever time they had left, knowing that they had learned to value every moment, every memory, and every new possibility the future could bring. Thus ends our story of the clock that goes backward, a story about time and memory, about love lost and found, about the importance of making peace with our past so we can fully embrace our future. It's a gentle reminder that time is not just something that passes, but something we can learn to understand, appreciate, and even, in a sense, master through wisdom and forgiveness. May this story help you find your own peace with time, your own reconciliations with the past, and your own openness to the infinite possibilities that each new moment brings. And now, as the gentle sounds of the clocks lull you, let yourself be carried into a peaceful sleep, knowing that time is your ally, not your enemy, and that every tick-tock of the clock is a small celebration of the precious gift that is being alive.